National security is becoming a large portion of modern intelligence and law enforcement. With the growing threat of attack from internal and external bodies, our agencies are working closely together to ensure the future safety and security of our country. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, or ASIO, is the leading intelligence agency in Australia, which has mandate over any other agencies. It deals primarily with external threats, but also works closely with the Australian Federal Police, or AFP, to help manage any internal issues. The role of our agencies has been more refined over recent years. The Prime Minister in 2009 asserted that, among other things, our law enforcement and intelligence roles are to ensure Australia is free from attack or any threat of one. The AFP has a firm relationship with other police agencies in Australia. They have a tactical alliance with the Australian Crime Commission, as well as constant collaboration with Interpol. More recently, legislative reforms have been put in place to ensure higher functioning cooperation between agencies, whilst investigating large and multifaceted operations. Newly added multi-jurisdictional protocols now ensure that there are more benefits to our national security, with agencies working closer together. The AFP has a large increase in powers over recent years, from the new control orders to making it an offence to travel to areas declared known for terrorist activities. In 2008, the Australian Prime Minister introduced the new concept of integrating our intelligence agencies. They are all now collectively listed under the National Intelligence Committee, which allows them to work closely with one another. ASIO has units within its organisation that work closely with local and state governments, as well as the private sector. The most notable being the National Threat Assessment Centre. They have brought together government agencies by undergoing the role of collecting and analysing all threat-based intelligence. It consists of officers from multiple branches of law enforcement, which allows for connectivity and coordination between these agencies, ensuring communication is upheld to spread relevant information between parties. In Australia, our law enforcement and intelligence agencies have some limitations with their information sharing options. Most importantly is the privacy laws that are in place in Australia that protect the sharing of information. This limits the communication between law enforcement and intelligence agencies. ASIO can cooperate with agencies from other countries to undergo its functions. With the approval of the Attorney General, they may communicate information to foreign intelligence agencies. There is broad legislation in place protecting the sharing of information, starting from Commonwealth down to state levels of acts. The most relevant acts in place are the Freedom of Information Act and the Privacy Act. ASIO is not held by the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, and the Privacy Act does not apply to agencies giving ASIO information, but is enforced in reverse. This can inflict barriers of communication if our intelligence agencies are limited by one-way sharing of information. The budget for intelligence in Australia has shown to be an impediment on the efficiency of their operations. ASIO's funding over the last decade has grown rapidly, especially since the approval of their new headquarters, which is estimated to have cost the taxpayers a staggering $700 million. Australia's budget for national security is approximately $4 billion per year as of 2010. In that same year, $1.4 billion were allocated to ASIO. This figure does seem alarming, particularly when considering the rapid jump from the government's allocation of $66 million in 2001. Limitations are also found when it comes to discrimination. Australia has multiple acts in place to protect citizens from discrimination based on our race, sex, age, disability, religion, and many more. With this legislation in place, it ensures that no one is profiled based on the above criteria. This also works as a disadvantage for intelligence and law enforcement agencies, as they can appear to be stereotyping when targeting threats. Religion is becoming the most recent victim in the more current threats to national security. Religious groups are starting to be targeted and misunderstood by the general public, which can lead to disaster. The agency with the most power in Australia, and therefore should be the most regulated, is ASIO. The Australian Security Intelligence Organisation Act has laid out a clear set of rules and regulations that ASIO must follow when dealing with a threat to security. The ASIO Act provides expectations and written guidelines in regard to collecting and handling personal information, who is allowed to see that information, threat assessment, and relevant principles that govern ASIO's work. Under Section 8A1 and Section 8A2 of the ASIO Act, the Attorney General may allow the Director General of Security to be watched in its functions. ASIO is also held by its Code of Conduct, which is a reflection of their 5 core values of excellence, integrity, respect, cooperation, and accountability. This code ensures that staff act accordingly to their core values in the law. ASIO and the AFP have quite different roles and objectives, but work quite collaboratively when their paths do cross, whether it be the AFP working externally with peacekeeping roles, or ASIO stepping in on internal threats to national security. ASIO do not have power of arrest. They are primarily an intelligence agency focused on preventative terrorism tasks. The AFP is Australia's leading law enforcement agency. They have the power to arrest but are focused on terrorism and transnational crime threats. The AFP gets more involved in external threats through ASIO when there is
Created using Powtoon.